Hey everyone, welcome to issue number 1 of the Judgment Day event, written by Kieron Gillen. But before we dive into the story, I want to ask you a favor. If you enjoy this video, please leave a like and a comment to help the channel grow. Now with that said, I thought this would be the perfect issue to cover after Immortal X-Men issue number 4, because the rest of the Immortal X-Men comics are tie-ins to this event. And on top of that, this story is one of my favorite events of that year, no question about it. Because as you all know, this event is a war between the mutants and the Eternals, with the Avengers caught in the middle. But before I get too far ahead of myself, let me give you some context to go along with this story, because a lot of things took place leading up to this point. Like, for example, Druid is considered the new Prime Eternal. Now as Prime Eternal, he needs a way to unite all the Eternals beneath him. And the way he's going about doing that is pretty messed up. Basically, the way he is going about doing it is by waging war against all of mutant kind by considering them as access deviations. Now with that said, this issue right here opens up with Tony Stark speaking to Sersi on a rooftop restaurant. And the reason for this conversation is because Tony Stark wants to know why they will be fighting in the coming days, and as of this moment, we don't know why she came out and told him this information, but all we know is that she did. But no matter how much Tony tries to pry out additional information, Sersi just refuses to budge. So with the conversation going nowhere, out of the sky above, the Phoenix completely blindsided Sersi, and before she knew it, she was facing 3 Avengers on her own. Now, these Avengers were Captain Marvel, Thor, and Echo's Phoenix. So as you may have guessed, she stood no chance against them, especially because she was caught off guard. But anyhow, she was taken out super freaking quick. So with Sersi down for the count, we skip over to the Mutants' treehouse and we see Cyclops as well as Jean Grey, talking about how the Phoenix is now in the hands of the Avengers. Which is a little bit funny to me because the way he was talking sounded as if he was a little bit jealous, because for the longest time, you have to understand that the Phoenix belonged to Jean Grey, which is a mutant. And because of that, he felt some kind of way over the fact that the Avengers had the Phoenix on their side now. But see, while he was talking, Jean Grey was completely ignoring him, not because she was being rude or anything, but she was ignoring him because she has other things on her mind. Because right outside the treehouse, we had a whole bunch of protesters, pretty much protesting the fact that the mutants are able to bring themselves back to life. That the mutants have the ability for resurrection. And because of this ability, a lot of people are completely pissed off at the mutants, but despite all that, we skip over to Krakoa. And when we get there, we see this counter in the corner stating that there are over 200,000 mutants currently on the island. But anyway, getting back to the main story, we see Nightcrawler as well as Destiny and Mystique sitting down trying to figure out the future. Because as of right now, Destiny is speaking of an impending war that's about to happen. So while the 3 of them are going through this long list of enemies that want the mutants dead, we see that Destiny gets another vision. And in that vision, she finds the name of the group that they are going to war with, which so happened to be the Eternals. So with the information out there, both Mystique as well as Nightcrawler started to make their moves. Because Nightcrawler immediately teleports through the portal to Arakko in order to warn the Great Ring. And as for Mystique, she made her way to the Quiet Council in order to fill them in. And much like Krakoa, when Nightcrawler arrives in Arakko, we get the number of mutants there as well, which is 1 million mutants. Which is ridiculous because all these mutants on Arakko are battle-hardened. All these mutants or Arakko are, for the most part, warrior-class mutants. And because of that, one would assume they can pose a threat to the Eternals moving forward in this story. So with that said, when Nightcrawler gets there, he runs into Cable, Storm, and Eric. And while they're all talking, they're pretty much trying to discuss and strategize on what to do moving forward and how best to prepare for this battle. And while they're doing that, Cable lets everybody know that he has a plan that could turn the tide. But regardless of them winning or losing, one question remains, and that is why they are fighting. Which Magneto explains perfectly by saying, just like how the gods tore down the Titans, the Eternals feel like the mutants will replace them because the mutants now have a gift of immortality, much like the Eternals themselves. So speaking of the Eternals, we skip over to the Avengers Mountain where we see Tony Stark once again talking to Sersi. But this time he is speaking to her in a psychic dampening room. With that stated, the reason why they're in there is because he is currently interrogating her about all the events that took place in the Eternals comics. Now for those who don't know what happened in that comic book run, basically the long and short of it is that Thanos became Prime Eternal. And while he was Prime Eternal, he was moments away from destroying the entire world, which is super freaking crazy. Because the Avengers had no idea anything was even going on until the very, very end. And the only way they found out was because the Eternals' plan completely backfired, which led to the Eternals eventually telling the Avengers a little of what happened. Now, because of this deep mistrust between the two teams, the Avengers decided to get the answers they needed firsthand by kidnapping Sersi. But one thing you need to know about Sersi is that she is a world-class matter manipulator, which means, no matter what Tony does in regard to this psychic room, she can still give them a heart attack just by thickening the blood in his body. But see, you have to understand that Sersi is a very curious person, and because of that, she really wanted to know why the Avengers went so far as to kidnap her. So with that said, she tells Tony Stark, how about he starts off by telling her everything he knows about what's going on, and she will try to fill in the blanks. Which led to Tony pretty much leveling with her. He tells her he knows all about Thanos and everything else about last month, and he knows that everybody has plans that sometimes get messed up. But what he is not okay with is how everything played out. Because he tells her, just like I said earlier in this video, that the world was almost moments away from being destroyed, and that was something he could not get behind. So with this interrogation pretty much going nowhere, the man himself, Captain America, walked into the room. And one of the first things he brings up is the fact that Sersi used to be an Avenger, and because of that, he believes that she deserves the benefit of the doubt. So when he started to talk to her, he tells her the Eternals are preparing for war. Now, this right here threw Sersi completely off, because up to this point, Sersi, as well as a few other Eternals, have been living outside of regular Eternals society, due to the secret they found out during their comic book run. And that secret was that the Eternals must use a human life in order to be reincarnated. So because of their isolation from the rest of the Eternals society, they had no idea what Druid is planning. Which is a perfect segue to what's about to happen next, because following this, we skipped over 1 hour earlier to Druid himself. And Druid is currently holding a council amongst all of the Eternals under his rule. And what he is currently doing is pleading his case on why they should invade Krakoa and why they should kill all the mutants. Because according to him, all the mutants are considered an access deviation, and because they are considered deviant who are deviating from the plan. So, because of that, they are now in direct violation of the third law, which is to correct all access deviations. Now Druid brings it all together by saying that their X gene was given to them by the Deviants, and because of that, they were allowed to access deviate for way too long. And with their current colonization of Mars is the first step in a bigger issue, because if they're not able to stop them now, they will probably spread across the galaxy, pretty much ruining billions of years worth of work. So the way he wants to go about fixing this is by using the Unimind. And that is the purpose of this meeting. Because based on his logic alone, the other Eternals have an obligation to agree with him and allow him to use their greatest weapon, which is freaking crazy. Now, before he is able to use that weapon, he has another part of his plan that he must implement. And that part takes us to the Exclusion. And for those who don't know what the Exclusion is where all the Eternals go when they are banished, and when he gets there, the person he is meeting with is Uranos. Now Uranos is a freaking monster and the strongest Eternal out there. So, when we first get there, we find out that these two have been having secret meetings, and the purpose of these conversations was so that Druid can get advice on how to wage war against the mutants. Now during their interaction, you can pretty much tell Uranos does not really care about Druid at all. In fact, it's pretty obvious that he is just biding his time and waiting for the perfect opportunity to escape. Now, this is very, very important to keep in mind because Druid offers Uranos a certain deal. And this deal is to allow him to leave out from his prison for 1 hour, and during that hour, he is going to be sent to Arakko to cause as much damage as possible. Which is something he is extremely good at doing. Because Uranos is an army of one. So with that established, we jump over to another conversation, and this conversation is between Druid and a very special somebody. And that very special somebody is McTaggart. Now this is huge because McTaggart knows all the information about Krakoa, and she is about to deliver this information to Druid free of charge because she states, Destiny told Mystique that if the mutants refuse to bring her back from the dead, Mystique should burn it down. And she should have made it clear the inverse was also true. Now with her being anti-mutant and him being anti-deviate, they are one and the same in this situation. So with that said, she tells him the perfect target to go for, which is the resurrection process itself. Now with the secret out, Druid wastes no time at all, as we skip over to the Quiet Council, which is currently having a meeting, trying to figure out what grudge the Eternals could potentially have against them. But before they could figure out the answer to what could be going on, a massive psychic attack rips right through Krakoa, because Druid's Eternals have just launched the Unimind. Now the purpose of them doing that attack, at this moment to open up this battle was, A, to catch them off guard, B, knock down all psychic defenses and make everybody vulnerable, and C, to take out the leadership. Which was extremely effective because this attack right here pretty much knocked everybody on their ass. So as predicted, the telepaths on the Quiet Council immediately enter the astral plane to protect their fellow Krakoans. So as the mutants wage warfare above the island, another company of Eternals outfitted with war armor descended from the sky to attack the disoriented mutants who are still in recovery. So with all hell breaking loose, Wolverine calls for them to sound the alarm, which led to all the mutants around the world teleporting in. So with all that going on, I could only imagine if this was a movie, because based on how this battle looks, this movie would be freaking fantastic. Because all the hands were on deck as the mutants fought the Eternal invasion. Now, while all this is going on, we skip over to Arakko, and in Arakko things aren't going smoothly there either. For in the middle of the Great Ring, we see another portal open up, and out of that portal walks out Uranos himself. Now this right here is a really great move on behalf of Druid's Eternals, because the Arakis are a battle-hardened group of mutants that can easily turn the tides against the Eternals. But with them sending Uranos there, Druid was successfully able to separate both Arakko from Krakoa, pretty much doing a divide and conquer move. So with that said, we skip back over to Krakoa, and when we get there, we see Wolverine picking up a strange smell coming from the council room, so with no time to waste, he makes a beeline in that direction, where he discovers Jack of Knives on the scene. So with his cover blown, Jack quickly attempted to assassinate Hope, but with Wolverine being who he is, he was able to jump right between the two, taking the blade that was intended for her. So with this sneak attack unsuccessful, Jack of Knives had to retreat, which ultimately led to Druid losing his opportunity to stop the resurrection process. Now with that established, Wolverine immediately uses his thoughts to call out to Jean Grey, to let her know that the Eternals now know their secret. So with that said, after the failed assassination attempt, the rest of Druid's forces withdrew from the battle. Which ultimately means that the mutants have to stay on their guard. Because the Eternals are a really old species. And because of their age, they are able to wait. They are able to wait for the perfect opportunity to try again. Which is really freaking scary because, at any moment, these Eternals can come back and end everything. Now what that established this battle is pretty much over. So following this, we skip a little bit in the future, where we see the fallen mutants beginning to re-emerge through the resurrection process. And while they're doing that, we see a frantic Nightcrawler teleport into the room and tell them that they have to hurry up and resurrect the leadership of Arakko, because what just happened there was crazy. So the very first person they resurrect was Cable, and Cable was completely beside himself as he screamed out, "What just happened?" Because when we transition over to Arakko, we find out that everything was completely destroyed. Because within a single hour, Uranos killed an untold amount of mutants, and to add insult to injuries, he left a giant X made of the bones of fallen Arakis as a reminder of his victory. Now, this is very significant because it took the mutants 1 day to terraform Mars. But it took Uranos 1 hour to completely destroy everything. So when everything was set and done, the machine teleports the monster back to his prison cell. And once he was back in the exclusion, Uranos informs Druid that he was able to destroy the gate to Earth as well as everybody in sight. And before he was called back, he left some of his arsenal behind to distract whoever was left. So following his mission briefing, Uranos made it a goal to point out that Druid forces must have failed. So in a joking manner, Uranos asked Druid to let him out again and he will try his best to spare a hemisphere. So with that said, we skipped over to Avenger Mountain where we see a broadcast on the television. And the person who is doing the broadcast is the Prime Eternal, Druid. And he is letting the people of Earth know that the Eternals are going to do everything in their power to take out the mutants, pretty much setting themselves up to look like the heroes. So as the humans cheer in the streets, Druid also informs them that he is deploying a special weapon. So he asks the people not to be afraid of the towering death machines that have emerged off the western seaboard of the United States. Because those towering machines are not really machines, but they are Eternals, they are the Hex. So with that said, Druid also goes on to tell everyone in that coastal region to head inland as swiftly as they can. With this news out in the open, we skip back over to Avenger Mountain, but this time, we see Captain America doing his famous war cry for the Avengers to assemble. Now with that being said, all the alarms start to go off as somebody just infiltrated Avengers Mountain. And the people who did it were Ajax and Macquarie along with a captured Sinister. And the reason why they are there is to put an end to this war. For in their eyes, this is indeed a holy war, so with this being a holy war, born of Holy Scripture, then that means only a God can rewrite the Scripture and end the war. And the only way to get a Celestial to rewrite the Scripture is to build their own with the help of Tony Stark. So with their plan laid out before Tony, he asked how the heck they were going to pull that off. In which Ajax reminds him that Avengers Mountain is made from a dead god. Which also means they already have everything they need to pull it off. So with that said, issue number 1 of Judgment Day comes to an end. Now, I hope you enjoyed this video, and please don't forget to leave a like and a comment if you want to see more videos like this. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.